Talk Politics is brought to you by the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce and Associated Industries of Arkansas, because business matters. Impact Management Group, Public Relations and Public Affairs, over a decade of issue advocacy success. Connect Arkansas, empowering entrepreneurs and Arkansans through greater utilization of the Internet. And ConwayArkansas.org. Get smart. Visit ConwayArkansas.org and see why Conway is the smart choice for business, education, and more.
All right, welcome to this latest edition of Talk Politics. I'm your host, Roby Brock. We are joined by Senator John Boozman. Good to have you with us.
Well, thank you for having us.
All right, if you want to get in on the action, we got a lot of questions already in queue, but you can use the Talk Politics hashtag on Facebook or on Twitter, and we will try to work your questions into the mix. Are you ready to roll?
No, it sounds good.
This half hour.
Great opportunity to hear what's on the people of Arkansas's mind.
Well, one of the things that are on people's mind is the fact that you have come out recently supporting a 50-cent sales tax increase for highway construction and repairs in Arkansas. Kind of tell me what moved you to that position. Why do you think that's the best mechanism to fund highway
well, as you know,
going forward?
I'm very, very familiar with our highways in the sense of being on transportation in the House and now on the Environment and Public Works and Commerce Committee, which encompasses all of that. And as you also know, that's really not a federal issue. But I can tell you what I feel like is just John Boozman, a guy that's going to have to decide which way he's going to vote. I'm going to vote for it. And the reason I am is that I really believe that for Arkansas to move forward, you have to have the infrastructure. We talk about jobs, jobs, jobs. The nice thing about the road construction stuff is you create some jobs when you do it, but by far the most important thing is the economic activity that comes about as a result of it.
Any concern about the effect on consumer spending, though, with another 50-cent sales tax? The fact we just got our revenue report for the state today, it showed a second month in a row of slowing consumer spending. Any concern because of that?
No, I think that is a factor. And again, the bottom line is, each individual, each consumer, each family is going to have to decide, is this, do we need to do this or not? But the days of the federal government sending, a bunch of money and paying for everything are over. We used to complain about, being donor states and all of those things where you'd send $1 to Washington and then you get 95 cents back or whatever. The average this last time was for every dollar you sent, most states got about $1.30 back. With $1 trillion deficits, that's not going to continue. And yet we do need the infrastructure to move forward. And so, when you're in traffic and you're sitting there and you're not moving, you just have to decide, is this worth that half cent? And then there's some exclusions. The other thing that I like about it, I think it's real important. I guess this goes back to my school board days when we were passing millages, which periodically, if you have growth, you have to do also. But it's sunset. This thing
it's got a
goes away. It's a 10-year sunset. And then the other thing is, like we tried to do as school board members, was delineate the projects that we were going to, use. And I didn't have anything to do with selecting the projects and things like that. This was a state function. And yet in looking at them, I think all the projects involved are worthy. And then there's a lot of turn back to the county. So it's just something that individuals are going to have to decide. I think it's probably going to be a close vote. But personally, I think I'll probably, I will check the yes box.
All right.
With that one.
Let's ask about another ballot measure. Again, we'll get to some more federal issues here in a second, but we got a question on this. Another ballot measure proposal centers on medical marijuana, medicinal marijuana. You're an eye physician. A lot of times they bring up the fact that this is relief for people with glaucoma. Are you going to vote for or against this measure, and why?
Well, I'm going to vote against it. And I really believe that medical marijuana, as you see it in other states, how it's progressed to and there are some legitimate cases where marijuana seems to be helpful. Glaucoma would be one, cancer therapy where you have nausea. With those things, though, you can actually get a pill for them, and you can actually get a prescription anyway that and go through the government and do that in an appropriate fashion. What seems to happen in the states that have done this, though, is that it really becomes just a free-for-all where, you go in, you're having some anxiety and this and that, and you get a prescription. So one of the really sad things that I've encountered lately is visiting with our county sheriffs and our law enforcement people. The number of old deaths by prescription drug medicines, it's just epidemic, especially among young people who are mixing drugs and alcohol, and they feel like they're protected because it's a prescription. So I'm pretty hard-nosed on these things, and I think, the mail that I get, is very much opposed to the idea of doing this at the federal level, and I personally am very much opposed also.
Any update on money to deepen the Arkansas River to 12 feet? The question says for about 0.1% of the money we send to Egypt for foreign aid, we could address a multitude of maintenance and improvement issues on the Arkansas River.
Well, our inland waterways are so important, building the capacity that we need to make it such. Well, we've got tremendous capacity. We need to get the traffic going, to actually fill that capacity. If we went and deepened the channel to 12 foot, the barges would be able to hold 40% more product with essentially very little, if any, cost of pushing it downstream. So your price goes down dramatically as far as delivering the goods. The problem is, it's well over $100 million to do that. And it's something that myself, have been working on for many years. Senator Inhofe over in Oklahoma is working on. And it's just a matter of priorities. And so far, we haven't been able to get the Corps to put that at the top of the list, the President, OMB, all of those things. But it is an important project. It seems like once we start to get a little ahead, then you had the flooding that we had, a year or so ago, 400-year flood. Now we've got a 400-year drought, it seems like, where we've got tugs that are essentially stuck in the river, where there were a tremendous amount of dredging and things. So the cost to the Corps just to maintain its infrastructure and repair infrastructure lately has really been great. If we can get back to kind of a manageable cycle, then perhaps we can get it done. But it is something that's really important.
You don't see anything moving on that, though, anytime soon because of some of the calamities that have happened over the last couple of years?
Well, it is a matter of priorities, and the Corps of Engineers is going to get so much money. And so, it's what we've got to work hard on, and we are working hard on it, is to try and, elevate that, up to the top so we can actually get it funded.
Another stalled project, but another question that we got a couple of questions on centers around the Farm Bill, which has been left unresolved since Congress recessed. What's the holdup in getting a Farm Bill passed? When will it finally get done? What are some key provisions in the Farm Bill for Arkansas in terms of what you think needs to be in there? And I guess in the committee meeting, they'll have to hammer out all these details, I guess, after the election.
Yeah, the Farm Bill is so important, not only to Arkansas, but to the country. We forget, in Arkansas, this is probably the leading economy producer, that we have in the state. And you go to a state like California and you think Silicon Valley and all of that, but agriculture is the leading thing in the state of California. So again, it's so important that we get this thing done. This is not about Democrats and Republicans and disagreements with that. It's about regional agriculture. Here we have southern agriculture that irrigates a lot. They're not too concerned about getting a crop because when you put the water and the fertilizer to it, things grow. They can control that. What they worry about is during the growth period is that their input costs go up dramatically and perhaps the price fails, and so regular crop insurance doesn't work for them. Crop insurance works for the I's, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, places like that. So they've got different concerns, and then you've got the wheat growers out west. The key is to mold all of that together. And I think at the end of the day, Frank Lucas and the committee chairman in the House and the committee chairman in the Senate, Senator Stabenow, will get that resolved. The other component is trying to reform the food stamp program. And we think of the Farm Bill in terms of all of this money going to farmers. The reality is only of $1 trillion bill over 10 years, only $200 million goes to farmers. $800 million, the vast majority, goes to the food stamp program. In the Senate, we were only able to cut that $4 billion of the $800 billion, which is not a substantial cut. And don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that we need to cut to people that actually need, but there is vast room for improvement in the program. It needs to be reworked, and we could save a lot of money and help those in need, okay? So that's really the sticking point, is how do you get enough votes, conservative votes, that will vote for a farm bill where you have real reform in the food stamp program, which definitely needs to be done, and then how do you do that without knocking off all the liberal votes? And so you've got that, and then the commodity aspect. But at the end of the day, and I'm not really quite sure how, at the end of the day, we're going to get it done this year. And it is vital to the state of Arkansas. It's vital to our farmers. The other thing is, and this is so important, this is one of the things that's putting a wet blanket on the economy. I was with a young farmer the other day. He wants to buy a tractor. He can't do that because he doesn't know what the rules are going to be for the next 5 years. As a result, he's not going to take out a loan. He's not going to buy that tractor, so the implement dealer will not be able to make a profit, and then in a small community in Arkansas plow that in. So there's all kinds of reasons that we need to get this done.
Let's stay somewhat in the area of agriculture here. The Governor Beebe has asked for a waiver of the renewable fuel standard. How do you see this issue playing out? Will there be a waiver? Can you comment on any progress at this point in time?
Well, I appreciate Governor Beebe's leadership at the state level in asking for the waiver. We've done that at the federal level also. And what's happening is, in the past, we've had about 40% of our corn crop going into ethanol. Now, with the drought and things, I think it'll be closer to 50%. That makes no sense at all. What that does is drive up, because you've got this floor, it drives up the cost of corn. And then not only is it corn, because when it gets so high, people switch into other commodities, wheat and things, so it drives up the cost of everything. And that translates not only to really making it very, very difficult with our poultry producers, our pigs and cattle, things like that, but it just drives up the price of commodities in general and really does translate to higher prices in the grocery store.
Have you gotten any feedback, though, from the EPA, from the federal government at all, that says, we recognize that it's an issue, here's our timetable for maybe making a decision on this?
No, so far they've really been pretty hard-hearted in the sense of sticking to their guns, and just don't seem to recognize the importance of doing it. And it's really, it's difficult. It's not only us in the United States, and again, we talk about, it's so important, to help the middle class, lower middle class. What does this do to single moms? What does it do to people on fixed incomes as your food source increases for ethanol? The other thing that's so crazy about this is that we're actually exporting a bunch of ethanol right now. So it makes no sense at all to take your corn supply, a good portion of it, stick it in this, do that, and then send it overseas.
Why haven't you persuaded these guys to use more soybean-based products? Come on now. It's Arkansas.
Well, soybeans right now are worth a lot of money, like all the other commodities. So.
Here is a question. U.S. households are facing an average tax increase of over $3,400 if Congress does not avert the so-called Fiscal Cliff, something that has been talked about quite a bit. How do we kind of settle the partisan political wrangling between a Republican Ohio congressman and a Democratic Nevada senator that has resulted in what could be a much higher tax bill? I guess maybe speak more to the case of, can we really get past some of the partisan divide that's up there? It has not happened almost in this entire presidential term. What's going to be different after November?
Well, we've simply got to address it. It's like a lot of things. You put them off, and then eventually you do have to address the problem. And there's real concern. If we allow taxes to go up dramatically, if all of the Bush tax credits, tax cuts expire, then it is going to raise everyone's taxes up very significantly. Along with that, we have sequestration, which is automatic cuts. We have another thing that's coming up in the sense of the having to increase the debt ceiling again. People will be asking, if we're going to increase the debt ceiling, we need to continue, reducing spending, trying to limit the growth of government. So it really is. It's just all of this stuff coming together. And I think what I would like to see done really is, in regard to that, is go ahead. Most economists that you visit with now really don't feel like we need to raise taxes on anybody. And you say, well, let's do it on the wealthy, those that are making 200, as individuals,
Right.
250,000. The reality is about 60% of that are small businesses that file in that way. And right now, if you're living in the real world, you understand how difficult it is, how difficult the economy is, especially with these high fuel prices. So to raise taxes on them, I think it's about 25% of the workforce. It makes no sense at all, okay?
Well, I get that you are opposed to it, and I think every member of Congress, every member of the U.S. Senate would tell me that they're opposed to the problems that are up there, but what's going to be the breakthrough solution?
Well, I think what I'd like to see, and again, I think people, in good faith are really looking at lots of different avenues. The avenue that I've been looking at, and many others, is to say, let's go for a year, okay, but let's put in hard and fast steps as to real tax reform, okay? Right now, if you're somebody that's a businessman trying to export, you might be paying the top bracket and thus be paying more than any other industrialized country in the world. You might be like GE, that with different tax breaks and stuff be paying nothing and yet making billions of dollars. So try and get a system, where you take and eliminate some of the loopholes, okay? Then you can actually pull down the brackets for everybody paying as far as corporate taxes, okay?
Well, what's keeping that from happening, though? Is it powerful special interests? Is it the lobbying groups that GE can employ? Why can't something that simple to solve a problem that everybody would probably express consensus on, why can't it get done?
Because it's not simple. The concept is simple, but the actuality of our tax code is tremendous. I was reading someplace that GE or somebody else, their tax document was like 40,000 pages. Can you imagine? I mean, that's just totally
It's a little smaller
ridiculous.
than mine, but not much. So.
But even yours, can get very, very complicated. So it is a complicated thing. It's going to take presidential leadership. You're going to have to really start talking about not we've got a grand bargain or whatever. You've got to write down what that grand bargain is. And so far, that's been very, very difficult to get in writing.
Why would it require presidential leadership? I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but I mean, Congress can write the laws and pass the laws, and you can override a presidential veto. So why can't leadership in Congress get it done?
I think history tells us that in order to get the big things done, that in the past and I think in the future, it's such a powerful office. You're going to have to get presidential leadership. You're going to have to get huge presidential buy-in, and then most importantly, you're going to have to get the public, to buy in also, Democrats and Republicans. This is a big thing, when you start talking about meaningful, not just tweaking at the edges, but when you talk about meaningful tax reform, it's going to be a big endeavor, but it's got to be done.
Let's turn to another question. I know we had one on postal offices here. This is from James Marples. Senator Boozman, there's been a lot of streamlining within the U.S. Postal Service in recent months, even talk of closing more post offices in small rural Arkansas towns. Do you foresee Congress coming to the aid with any kind of financial package to avert this from happening? Won't this be another severe blow to the economy if they do wind up closing those? And I think it just gets to the larger question of how do you cut the government monster, but you want to keep where it's,
right.
Obviously it's not as profitable as it could be, or it's not as revenue neutral as it could be.
Well, I think there's certainly, government plays a role in areas that you need to provide a service, whether or not it's cost effective or not. What I mean by that is we've got areas in the country where lots of seniors live. They rely on the post office for their medicine, their Social Security check, and things like that. And so, you need a post office presence there, okay? You've got to figure out how to do that in a cost-efficient way, and we've got to help the post office reinvent themselves. My state director always reminds me, she says, John, when people talk about the post office, remind them that probably 80% of the inquiries that we get are either through email or through a phone call. Nobody's writing us about the post office. And so they're in a situation where they've got to reinvent themselves, like so many businesses have. Whether it's the journalism model, and you're a great example of that. You've have a niche and essentially done things differently nobody could have dreamed of doing 10 years ago. And so the post office is going to have to find their place. We're going to have to help them with that. The Senate actually passed a bill that I voted for that had a lot of reform in it. They need to shrink their size. And then again, we have to help them reinvent their model to serve and do in a little different way than they've done in the past. I don't see the government having to spend perhaps a lot of money, from the federal treasury in doing that. There is an issue where they've overfunded. I think it's either their health insurance. I think it's their health insurance where they've overfunded several $billion. We're going to give that back to them. I think they're going to use a lot of that money to buy out existing contracts, reduce their workforce, and be a lot more mean and lean as they go forward.
Some of these questions kind of all come to the same key point here that we got a more general question on. Some say more austerity is the key, but we've seen that too much austerity can also trigger government services problems and major debt default. Look to Greece and some things happening in Europe. Can austerity go too far, and how do you kind of strike the balance on that? Because it's easy to talk that game, a lot more complicated to actually do it.
No, I think you can go far, and we have to remember that we didn't get in the situation that we're in overnight. This has taken probably 50 years, and now our country, like so many other countries, are coming to a head. So we've got to do it over a period of time. On the other hand, these are just simple rules. There was a book that was written, an economics book about the times that have happened in the past as far as economic calamities to different countries. And every country felt, the name of the book is This Time It's Different. And everyone thought, with their particular situation, they were different. But the reality is these are basic economic rules, and you can't have over $1 trillion deficit year after year after year. Right now, a lot of our debt is being funded by the Federal Reserve. At some point, interest rates are going to tick back up. Historically, they're about 6%. We're paying almost nothing now, although we're still paying a lot of money because the debt is so high. But very, very low interest rates. For every 1% increase, it's probably $1.3 trillion over 10 years. The government was almost shut down and stuff over $1.2 trillion. So with 1% increase, we would wipe out all of that savings out. So if interest rates tick back up, and they will, eventually, then we're really going to have a significant problem. So we've got to get our debt under control. We've got to do that in a logical, reasonable way. And with that, go on. But you do have to, the bottom line is you can't spend a whole lot more than you're making.
This is from a veteran. I'll have to clean up a little bit of this question here to remove one of the expletives. But ask Senator Boozman why he voted against a veterans aid bill that he authored.
Well, Rachel Maddow said I authored that.
Okay.
And it was really a crazy deal. I've been very active on the Veterans Affairs Committee, for years. In fact, since I was in Congress. And so Congress, Senate, I've been there 11 years. The first bill that we passed in the Senate, first bill we authored was about traumatic brain injury, and helping with that, and got that mixed in with another bill. What happened with this was I had a bill that had to do with veterans coming out of the service, transitioning back into the workforce. Senator Murray took my idea, changed it, put it in her bill, okay, and then wrote a bill, did that with some others, which is very common. I'm not complaining about that at all. And then essentially wrote a bill and presented it. I in no way authored the bill. I'd never seen the bill, till it came out, and it had some good stuff in there and it had some bad stuff in there. So I felt like we could have cleaned the bill up, in the sense of making some amendments. Senator Reid put it on the floor, and first thing he did was the Office of the Parliamentarian ruled that it wasn't paid for, okay, that it broke the Budget Act. So, what we wanted to do was have the ability to amend it. We could have worked that out, gotten a good pay for Senator Reid chose not to amend the bill. So I voted against not breaking the budget caps. Again, you can't have trillion-dollar deficits year after year. Sends it back to committee, and then we go forward.
Give me some insight here, because I'm not up there every day and I don't see this behind the scenes. Do you have conversations with Senator Reid, or do you strictly caucus with Republican members and stay kind of in line with that membership and have conversations there?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, it's interesting that the Senate is a very small place, and so you get to know people. The bill that Senator Murray took, that was my bill, it was also Senator Begich's bill. We did it together, okay, that she changed, stuck in her bill. So no, not at all. Again, and the sad thing about this veterans deal is that veterans issues really have been very bipartisan, through the years. And so this was just a point to try and embarrass Republicans by having to vote against this. What it did was it didn't kill the bill, it just sent it back to committee, so you have to get the pay for straightened out.
Yeah.
The other problem with the bill, the main portion of the bill, we've got to help veterans get back to work. Okay, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. What it did was it created a Jobs Corps program, and when you figured it out, each veteran got about $50,000. So the veteran would have a job, working for the federal government in the forest or something, for about a year to a year and a half. Then when the money went away, the job went away. Okay. And so he said, well, let's do the job training, but let's make a provision in there. This is how we wanted to amend it. Let's put a provision in there that with attrition, veterans would have first preference, so they could actually, as the government workforce through attrition, retirements and stuff, they would have preference, to fill those jobs in those areas, and then they'd have a real job, that would last forever. Those are the common sense things that you need to do, rather than some short-sighted deal that just boosts employment so you can brag about it for a year.
Two quick questions. Another kind of state issue kind of came to a head last week was Americans for Prosperity ad that is on television. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it or not. It basically cites some economic statistics about Arkansas that they could do better. Governor Beebe took great offense to it. I'm sure you've read. You've been an office holder during this tenure. What's your reaction to that controversy?
Well, it's hard. I think my family moved to Fort Smith in 1871, and in fact, I tell people, that's where the U.S. Marshals Museum is going to be built, and they had Descendants Day and all those kind of things. And they asked me if I was a descendant of the Marshals, and I said, no, my great fear is that they were going to find that I was a descendant of the guys that they were, rounding up.
Putting in jail, that's right.
But no, we can be very, very proud of our state. Certainly, we've got tremendous room for improvement, and we're all committed to doing that. This is a very, very difficult time economically, and when you have a situation where you have to live within your means, like the state of Arkansas, really does make for some tough choices. On the other hand, I'm a guy that feels like we can run leaner and meaner, and always do a better job, a significantly better job in some areas.
One area where there's probably some room for improvement, and I have to use this as our last question here. You're a former Razorback football player. What's your take on the state of the Hog Nation?
Let's talk about the important stuff. Heck with this other stuff.
Last question, though. Now, give me your take on the Razorback football program. Where's it going? What should people perhaps look to in terms of leadership for the future?
Well, I thought Jeff Long did a really good job in getting rid of Bobby Petrino with the circumstances, and the way he conducted himself at the press conference was so open and things. And this is just a very, very difficult situation. On paper, no one would have, that was a very logical move, right, and things, the replacement and all of that. But it's just a tough situation. So when you're really down in the dumps, you can think it could be worse. You could be the coach right now, under the pressure they're in. But we've got a great program, and we're gonna to live to fight another day. The sad thing is we were right at that pinnacle where we could literally play with anybody, and I believe that we'll bounce back. And I wouldn't be surprised at all. This is a John Boozman prediction. I wouldn't be surprised at all that we gave some people a real run for their money that maybe people have written off that we shouldn't, as the season winds down.
Spoken like a true insider. Thank you for your time. We've been with Senator John Boozman for the last half hour. We appreciate you tuning in, and thank you for your questions. Senator Boozman, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hope you'll be back with us.
Thanks for having me, as always.